Today I will be explaining the life cycle of a star. This is a diagram of the life cycle of two stars. The star on top is the life cycle of a low-mass star. The star on bottom is the life cycle of a high-mass star. I will first be explaining the life cycle of a low-mass star. Here's a simple diagram of just a low-mass star. There are 6 main stages in the life cycle. The nebula is the creator of all the stars. It is composed of 70% hydrogen, 28% helium, and 2% heavier elements. The nebula is like a large cloud of gas. The protostar of a low-mass star is much smaller than the protostar of a high-mass star. The protostar is where gravity creates dense regions to become more compact, which then begins to spin. The spinning regions begin to flatten to a disk that has central concentration of matter, which happens to be the protostar. This is where nuclear fusion happens. The new star of a star is the same size as the sun. The star is part of the main sequence, which is where energy continues to be generated in the core of the star. As a star the size of this can stay on the main sequence for about 10 billion years. When the star leaves, it means the fusion of hydrogen is almost used up. The red giant is when a shell grows around the star and begins to grow cool and expand. When this happens, the star becomes cooler and glows red. This is how the red giant is formed. The planetary nebula happens when the outer gases drift away and the remaining core heats these expanding gases. These gases are the planetary nebula. The white dwarf is the last stage for the low-mass star. When a planetary nebula disappears, gravity causes the remaining matter in the star to collapse. This matter keeps collapsing until it is no longer able to be pressed together. This is the white dwarf. The next star I will be explaining is the high-mass star. This is a diagram of the life cycle of a high-mass star. It also has 6 main stages. The nebula is also the creators of the high-mass stars. The protostar of a high-mass star is larger than the protostar of a low-mass star. It is exactly like the low-mass star, however, it's just larger. The massive star is about 8 times larger than the star of the size of the sun. The massive star is also part of the main sequence. However, it typically does not stay on the main sequence as long. Since these stars are larger, they use their hydrogen faster. The red supergiant is a large red star that is very bright. Like these giants, they have a shell that grows around them and makes them expand. The supernova is when white dwarfs collapse and creates high pressures and temperatures to occur when their nuclear fusion happens again, which then energy released from the core collapses is transferred to the outer layers of the star, and a huge explosion occurs. This is a supernova. The last stage of a high-mass star is a neutron star. Only stars that have 8 times more mass than the sun become this type of star. After the explosion of a supernova, the core of the sun begins to contract into a small dense ball of neutrons. This is a neutron star.
What have you learned about the life cycle of a star, Michael?
I have learned that there are several different stages that a star has to go through, starting with the nebula and ending either with a white dwarf or a neutron star, depending on what path of life the star takes. You can either take the bigger path or the smaller path.
Matthew, what did you learn about the life cycle of a star?
I've learned there's many different stages of a star. My favorite is the red giant, because as it uses all its hydrogen, it turns a different color, the color red. And it's the smallest, biggest star, because it's not overly big, but it's not small like a white star. And it's pretty hot too. Yeah.
Tyler, what did you learn about the life cycle of a star?
I learned about supernovas, which I really like because it's like the most intense part of the life cycle of a star. It's basically like this huge explosion due to immense amounts of pressure, which like sends all sorts of like stellar material all around into space, and it's the brightest part of the star's life cycle, I believe. And after that, it like condenses down. It's just like the climax to me of the life cycle of a star. Corey, what have you learned about the life cycle of a star?
I learned that the nebula is the creator of all the stars, which creates a protostar. A protostar is like a baby star. It is composed of helium and hydrogen and other materials that are like heavier than them. My favorite part about is the protostar because it's due to gravity, it flattens it out into like a pancake, which it really reminds me of, but it's probably my favorite part.